it's a very valid observation, sir. But may I request, may I know why you made this observation? I'm not a genuine Bengali. So he pointed at my fingers and he said, "See, Bengalis wear a lot of rings. You know, you are not wearing any rings, so you are not a genuine Bengali." So I replied to him and I said, "Sir, I cannot afford to be superstitious." He said, "Why?" He says, so I replied, "Sir, I was born on the 13th." So uh, often we find that a little bit of humor can diffuse a stressful situation, and a stressful situation is not the only time when humor is there to diffuse the stress or cut the ice. Very often in business situations, it is this little touch of humor which helps build bonds, helps seal deals. Of course, there have been many senior people who have known the value of humor. I am reminded of and that too at a very critical time when things are really worrisome and serious. I'm reminded of the dictator of Spain, General Franco. So General Franco was the uh, unchallenged dictator of Spain, a terrifying man, and he was on his deathbed. So General Franco was slipping in and out of coma, and it was apparent that he would not perhaps survive the night. So all his favorite officers assembled around him, all his loved ones were assembled around him, and General Franco opens his eyes. And imagine the scene. He's lying on the bed and he sees he's surrounded on all sides by his generals and all his senior military officers, all the people he loves. So General Franco asks, "Why are they all here?" So the nurse says, "General, they are here to bid you goodbye." And General Franco, without blinking an eyelid, says, "Why? Where are they going?" So that is ability, that is wit, even on the deathbed. And those were his last words. Why? Where are they going? So look at the confidence of the man. Uh, in fact, I have a interesting series of uh, final words which we can discuss of people who went who met their deaths with something funny on their lips. And I shall send you a link to the article that I have online. But in business, we often face a scenario worse than death. It is a fate worse than death sometimes when we are faced with difficult propositions. I used to have a superior team leader equate who used to equate every situation with some scene, some scenario, or some part of the movie Sholay. So there was a time where there was a particularly messy task to be done, and I had a very terrible boss, and he was putting us all onto a cross-functional team. So I was being nominated to the cross-functional team, and my name was read out, and I was looking very upset because it was going to be a very messy task. And then my team leader's name was also announced to be part of the team. And right there, we are trying to look very serious, and my team leader mutters under his breath, "ठाकुर ने हिजड़ों की फौज बनाई है." And suddenly, it was not a very difficult task that we were facing. It was something that we would all, with laughter and with our own way of handling things, we would handle things. And I guess the good parts that we remember of our life are always filled with laughter. Whether it is our college days, whether it is playing hooky in college, in our initial days of work, whether the times we've spent with our brothers, sisters, and cousins, they are always filled with joy and laughter. For some reason, we believe that laughter and a lightheartedness is no longer part of officialdom, quote unquote. But you will see that the best teams are the ones who take on the most difficult tasks with lightheartedness. And I am reminded of this video which went viral of Indian troops facing up to the Chinese troops. So there is a bunch of Chinese troops and they are trying to bully the Indian troops. And the Indian troops are, very gently pushing them back towards their side of the border. And one of the soldiers asked the Chinese soldiers in Hindi, Golgappe khayega? And that's gone viral. If you haven't seen it, you can realize that here is a person who's mature, who's undaunted by the might of the People's Liberation Army in front of him, that he's able to look him in the eye, push him back, and say, Golgappe khayega. So, Harini, what is the question that you have for me?
Sujan, yes. So, so this is the first time in the history of sessions that I have been supposed to host, is the guest has kind of hijacked the session. So, fantastic. I loved it. I loved it. Yeah, but then I'll give you your space for several reasons. So first of all, this is a group where I have become a part of their family, and I don't know how. And I happen to be very, very involved in the initiative that they're doing. They're doing some amazing work in helping knowledge creation within the HR fraternity. And I've been here now doing a few sessions, and I thought it makes a lot of sense to have you here and share some experiences. I wanted to actually start with this. Now, Sujan, you might be knowing I'm a storyteller. There are other people here who have heard my stories. So my mother, she was a very, very well-known English teacher, and she would come home with exam answer sheets, and she would tell me that pick up this particular answer sheet and read the essay. It will be a learning for you. And a lot of my learning used to happen like this when I used to read essays of my school seniors. So she used to ensure that I pick up one particular student's answer sheet and read the essay, the examination essay. And one essay really stood out. I even remember the handwriting. I remember the words that were scored off. That essay was an autobiography of a broken bangle. And any one of us who have written autobiographies in school would have written about how the bangle was born and how the bangle went on from someone's hand to someone's hand and so on, and would have written something very normal. When I read this essay, in about 350 words, I learned history, I learned emotions, I learned experiences of life, and so many things. It was a story of a Rajput princess and how the bangle was extremely happy and joyous when it went on her wrist at the time of her marriage, and how the bangle experienced life by staying on her wrist throughout her life. And when she became a widow, when the Rajput prince lost his life in battle, how the bangle actually broke and shed tears along with the princess. Now, this essay is something which has been instrumental in what I am today in a big way. Okay, 350 words, grade 9 student examination essay, where we can't even think of words to write on the paper, was like a period drama from a Sanjay Leela Bhansali movie. Okay, and the person who wrote that essay, ladies and gentlemen, is Sujan Roy. And I've had the privilege of growing up looking at this person with awe, seriously, and I mean every word of what I say. And then he left school, and then I came to grade 9. I was in grade 10, and when I gave my exams, when I used to write my English essay, I used to remember this particular essay and the many other essays that he has written. It stayed in my mind, and I can't thank my mother enough for introducing me to this wonderful human being at that time. And then life took its course. We went our ways. And after many years, I think fast forward several years, and I felt, that I've reached somewhere and I can now go and face this person. And I decided to connect back with him. By then, so somewhere last year, 2019, I invited him over to home, and without batting an eyelid, he was there. And I said, great. So I was actually talking about how much I have grown and how much I had achieved. Little did I know that I was talking to the head of international business passenger vehicles of Tata Motors. Absolutely down to earth, and someone who has achieved so much And I'm so proud to have been his follower when I was at school. I'm so proud that he's been my school senior. And I'm so proud that I'm able to reach out to him even now. When I invited him for this, I said, this is a series that I'm really passionately driving. I love these conversations that I do with top-notch professionals in the country. Will you be my guest? Without batting an eyelid, the answer again was yes. And I'm deeply touched by his absolutely down-to-earth behavior, and wonderful, Sujan, hats off to you. So I thought let me weave this whole thing as a conversation. I've known your sense of humor since school days. And off late, we've been sharing a lot of English language fun because we are both very passionate about it. I want you to tell me, after the autobiography of the broken bangle to head of international business passenger vehicles, Tata Motors, can you fill in the blanks and tell us how communication, your absolute brilliant skill of communication, has really helped you to drive your career paths?
Thank you for that very flattering introduction, Harini. For those of you who didn't understand the connection, Harini's mother was my favorite teacher in school, my English teacher, and my first passion was never automobiles. Automobiles is my second passion. My first passion was English. Unfortunately, at the time when I graduated or did my post-graduation, English was not a valid option as a career for me to pursue. Perhaps I should have pursued it. I had a reverse three idiots sort of situation where my parents were pursuing me, pushing me to go and do my master's in English, do a MA in English. And I said, wait a minute, I don't think I can get a job with an MA in English. I need to do something more worthwhile with my life. Ultimately, automobiles was a second passion which came out of communication, Harini. As you know, I love to write, I love to speak, and what happened is one day my dad saw a little ad in Times of India which said that automobile magazine looking for interns, and this was during my 12th standard vacation. So I told him that, my 12th standard results will be out. I'll have to go in for my graduation. He said, no matter, you just go and attend the interview. And I went to this interview, and there were many people waiting there to become an intern in this automobile magazine. It was at that time the oldest automobile magazine in India, after all. But none of these candidates, they stayed there after they were told that it was a no payment position. They would have to work for free. And ultimately, when my turn came and the proprietor asked me, so do you realize that this is a no pay position? I said, yes, I suppose an internship is without pay. Is that a problem for you? I said, no. And that is how I got working in an automotive magazine. I stayed with the magazine for 3 years of my graduation, 2 years of my post-graduation, working part-time. I've always, whenever I'm not a religious man, but when I count my blessings, I count my blessings that I've had fantastic teachers. I've had fantastic team members, some of whom I see who are present in this webinar today. And it is from these people that I have been able to grow. And my teachers all through my graduation and post-graduation understood that I worked a full-time job, and they supported me with their notes, and they supported me with their help wherever I could. I required their help in understanding difficult subjects. And so I was able to do my post-graduation and graduation while simultaneously working, most of it for free. At later period, I received a paltry salary, which covered the to and fro journey. But the more important thing is ultimately when Tata Motors came to campus at Bombay University, I had already been working for an auto magazine. And the month that they came to interview me, the cover story was the eulogy to the legendary managing director of Tata Motors, Mr. Sumant Mulgaonkar. Mr. Sumant Mulgaonkar remains on as part of our lives today, of every Indian definitely, as the legendary vehicle Sumo. People think Sumo is named after the sumo wrestler. It is actually a short form of the Marathi name Sumo, Sumant Mulgaonkar. That was the month he passed away, and I had written the cover story. And when they read through it, when they read about his life, they were impressed, and that's how I joined Tata Motors. I have not been with Tata Motors all along. That was my first stint in Tata Motors. This is my second stint. I went on, worked with half a dozen automobile companies, the best companies in the world, the best places to learn about cars. And that's how I became what I am. I have been extraordinarily lucky, to say the least. But more importantly, more than luck, I think I have always had great people to teach me. And it perhaps started with a school teacher who took me to a different heights with my abilities and led me to trust in myself.
Brilliant, wonderful. And, we're all doing a lot of communication at our workplace, right? So many a time the prankster in me and one of my very good friends and teammate Ruhat Butch was there on the call. I don't know if he's still there. So there's always a little prankster in me which keeps working in the back of my brain. And many times I try to bring them that the prankster comes out and I don't have to do much. The prankster comes out and starts appearing in the communication that I do. So whether it's verbal communication or written communication, you sometimes see that prankster coming in. So have you had any such experiences? Have you seen that humor in communication, in any situation in your work life? Has humor come to your rescue? Has it helped lighten the moment and really rescue you?
Very recently, a colleague of mine, uh, as in aviation, in automobiles also increasingly because of reasons of fuel efficiency and emission compliance, we are looking to lighten vehicles up. Yeah, we are looking to lighten vehicles, making them lighter and lighter. And a colleague of mine, an engineering colleague of mine, recently wrote to me with a lengthy email explaining why going forward in the future we should eliminate the spare wheel, which is you use in case of a puncture, from the vehicle. So he gave a very lengthy email to me with data and with all the information. And unfortunately, I did not want to reply back to him in the same vein with a longish email. And I replied to him with 4 letters: over my dead body. So often a long-winded email, which is not in the interest of the customer, needs a light-hearted response to uh, stop people in their tracks with their silly ideas. So this is something which I can think of right now.
Brilliant. I must say that it requires a lot of courage to be humorous, because humor is like we all say, humor is serious business, and you also have to be able to strike the right chord, because always there's this danger of people misunderstanding when you're trying to be humorous. Because being humorous and cracking a joke can be two very very different things. And in the corporate world, it's not very nice to crack a joke when you're doing serious correspondence. So blending in humor is extremely difficult. So can you give this group some tips on what are those tips and tricks to get to blend humor into corporate communication, or any kind of communication that you would do in your workplace?
Firstly, a word of caution. Humor is often seen as a bad thing uh, in the corporate world. People tend to take you less seriously. There are too many people who are, for the want of a better word, too full of themselves in the corporate world. There are too many masks out there. Once people realize that you are genuine, there used to be this beautiful acronym in the good old 90s with respect to computers called WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. That there is no mask on this person, and what he says is genuine, and it's all from the heart. And this once there is less of a mask in office, in your interactions, then your interactions become genuine. Then humor is definitely going to appear. The reason why we laugh so much more as children, as youth, is we have not yet discovered our masks. We are genuine. We are the same way to everybody. When we get hurt, we cry. Within 2 minutes, we dust ourselves up and we are giggling with our friends again. The reason why we become serious, why we don't make friends, why we don't talk to strangers, why we don't lick ice cream cones the way we want to in public, is because we develop this mask for ourselves. And once the work culture is such that people do not have masks to defend, humor becomes a possibility. And the thing is, humor does not need work. It is already there amongst us. It is something that we have lost along the way. I give this example very often, that walk into a kindergarten class and ask, generally stand there and ask, how many of this class can draw? All the hands will go up. How many can dance? All the hands will go up. How many of you can sing? All the hands will go up. Go to the same very class in the ninth standard or the 10th standard and ask these three questions, and you'll find very few hands will go up, whether to draw, whether to dance, whether to sing. Why? I didn't say that who here can sing like Lata Mangeshkar, who here can dance like, I don't know, I can't think of
Michael
any
Jackson.
dance.
Michael
Yeah,
Jackson.
Michael Jackson. So who can draw like MF Hussain? I just said who can draw. Exactly. So the reason people stop putting up their hands is we are so worried about what the rest of the world will think of us. We start living with masks, and that is where we lose our genuineness. It is time for us to unburden ourselves of these heavy masks that we carry. And this is a joke which is so often repeated in my team that it has become almost legendary. Yeah. So there was this captain who is on the deck of his ship, and there used to be in the days of the sailing ships a thing known as a crow's nest. That is the highest point on the top of the mast, right? And there's a lookout there who's standing with a telescope looking around for enemies coming by. So the chap on the crow's nest says, "Captain ahoy, ship ahoy! There is a pirate ship bearing down on us." So the captain makes note of it. He turns to his valet or his servant who's next to him, and he says, "Valet, go and get me my red coat." So one of the junior officers observes that, and he realizes that if there is going to be a battle, a red coat really doesn't serve any purpose. He says, "My captain, why did you ask for the red coat?" So the captain says, "That's because if I'm shot during the battle, which is sure to follow, you don't see me bleeding and lose heart. You will continue fighting." So everybody is so enthused. It's fantastic. Captain has asked for a red coat so that we remain, motivated. Then after some time, from the crow's nest comes the bad news. "Captain, there are five more pirate ships coming this way." The captain turns around to his valet and says, "Valet, get me yellow pants." So this is so when I tell my team that it is time for a red coat or a yellow pant, they know when the sales figures are bad, we ask for a red coat. When things are really bad, we say, "Let us get into our yellow pants." So so the team knows that. So so it is at a time when things are bad, when the outlook is bleak, a little bit of humor tells us that nothing is wrong. We can get through this. We have got through many battles. There have been many battles when we have asked for our red coats and yellow pants, and we have survived it all.
Absolutely. This was, it took me a couple of seconds to really understand, but this is subtlety at its best. And very relevant here is I have a question from Ruhat. First of all, Ruhat has a comment where he says that whenever Harini would become a prankster, she would narrate stories, which made me think humor is basically chaos in the mind that you remember during Serenity. Yeah, well said. Yeah, but Ruhat's question is people say use humor subtly, but don't continue being humorous because you might be considered a joker. So he wants to wants to know your views on this. That if you use too much of humor, especially in the workplace, will you be considered a joker? Or
Actually,
how do you avoid that?
actually, I do not think that there is a limit prescribed in any book or any modicum. It is when you force some things, you know that it is going overboard. Just don't force things. Yeah. What is natural, what comes to you, what is part of your personality will shine through. And there have been many movies. There was this beautiful movie about a doctor who uses humor to treat his patients, by Tom Hanks. I forget the name of the movie. Where he's ridiculed because he used humor as medicine. certain amount of course, maturity is required by the people around them, around you. It helps that if you are in a senior position, you can lead the agenda that yes, humor is acceptable, fun is acceptable. But when a person at a junior level starts with humor, it requires courage. I agree, but in moderate amounts, it can be introduced in. And people, it is how genuine you are, and there is no limit to how much humor can be used. In fact, Virgin Atlantic chairman, he is known to do ridiculous things with. There was actually a time when they launched a competitor, Virgin Music. Richard Branson actually was launching a competitor to the iPod, yeah, the Apple iPod. And during the launch, he came onto the stage wearing nothing but the music player strategically placed. Of course, that is going beyond something. That is I wouldn't dare to do that. But Richard Branson can carry it off because he has that personality which is bubbly and over the top.
Absolutely, yeah. So do it as much. I mean, do it as much as you can carry. That's the message. Right?
Exactly.
You can't overdo. Yeah, which is true. I think for anything that you do, if you overdo something, then you're not you yourself, and that really shows, and people would get it. So you worked in the best of brands. You have such an impressive career behind you. So can you think about situations where you might have, when I do this, I look back at situations which I have handled, and I think that I have done this a little more, added some more humor in this and would have made things better. Are there situations where you can compare and contrast that if humor was at work, things would have been different, or things would have been better, or things were not so good because there was too much humor at work? Was humor anywhere overdoing its presence? Can you think of such experiences in
I,
the past?
I frankly cannot think of any situation where humor went above board. As long as humor is not directed to somebody, when it becomes at somebody beyond a certain point where a person is getting uncomfortable, when it stops being humor and it becomes bullying. Yeah. Recently, we said goodbye to a colleague who was, of all things, he was our department HR head. Now, this colleague was a person who loves food, loves to eat, loves to laugh very loudly, and his send off was nothing but a roast. People were basically pulling his leg. At no point was it embarrassing. At no point was it something that would make him feel uncomfortable. It was all in good humor, and that roast, that send off was fantastic. But if there is a humor which is constantly directed at someone's appearance, which he's uncomfortable with, or his origins or his way of speaking, that is no longer humor. It becomes bullying at office, and it should be put down. Especially as HR people, you would have come across many cases where it has amounted to harassment. So that is where I would say it is going overboard. But otherwise, I have seen humor only solve problems. Very often, working with the Japanese and Germans, both races not at all known for their sense of humor. You would strike the funny chord with them after all the meetings were done, and you were sitting down for a meal, and you would discover a funny moment. For example, there was the time when my Japanese colleagues took me out, thinking I was not aware what was happening, and they took me to eat the infamous or famous puffer fish. So they served fish to me and said, Sujan-san, would you like to take the first bite of the fish? I said, certainly. Thank you for the honor, and I cut up a piece of paper of the fish and ate it. And they were watching me very closely, and they said, how does it taste? I said, like wet tissue paper, and they laughed very hard. Then they said, do you know what you ate? I said, yes, that is fugu, or the puffer fish. Do you know why we made you eat it first? I said, it's got a neurotoxin. If it's not prepared properly within 8 seconds or something, I would be dead before anything could be done to me. So they said, so you still ate it first? I said, well, everybody has to die. And what better way to die but besides eating a very, very expensive dish of Japanese food, which others are going to pay for. So it was a moment of bravado, a moment of courage. And while we all laughed at it, there was a different respect from the Japanese from that moment onwards. That we thought that this guy doesn't know what he's going to eat right now. It was deadly poison, but he ate it despite knowing it, and he didn't have any airs about it. So that was something that comes to me.
Amazing. So, in your journey from what I knew you last autobiography of a broken bangle till now, uh, you've evolved. I think you've come really long way. So, what has been instrumental? What were those learning steps in your journey where you worked on? I mean, you've been doing a people facing function, a client facing function all your life, being selling stuff. Yeah, but what have been those turning points where you went on, molding yourself into being a better communicator, balancing humor, getting the right amount of humor in place and all of that. So can you just take us through your journey, how you evolved as as what you are today?
So I always loved oratory because my grandfather was very present at a very impressionable age. He was a leader in his own right. One of the first Western educated doctors in Eastern India. uh, he had a almost princely upbringing, and he was determined to have that sort of you know charisma passed on to me. So I had been always told by my grandfather at an early age, that leaders are great orators and you must become a good orator. So it was sort of drilled into me at a very formative age. However, despite all my education and my formal training with oratory, my dad insisted that I actually formally learn oratory at a separate class. There, I never realized what my grandfather and my father said when they said that I should take up oratory. Professionally, I should learn it. Until I went to a beautiful country called Oman. And as I told you, I've been very lucky with teachers, with bosses, with team members. I had a boss called Mr. Anthony Lobo, who joined a club called Toastmasters, which has just started off in Oman. And I hated, going there, because after a long day's work, who would want to go? And of all things, they used to assemble in the graveyard of a church, because that was the only place which was available to us. So we used to assemble at the graveyard of a church where there was a porta cabin put in, and giving speeches was actually called raising the dead. So at the end of the day, you don't want to go to a graveyard and it is 50 degrees centigrade outside and practice oratory. But he was my boss. He would grab me by my cuff and bundle me into his car and take me to the Toastmaster sessions. After the fourth or fifth session, I realized what was happening. I had, never realized that there was so much to learn about communication. And Toastmasters in Oman really, really polished me up from a rough stone. And thanks to Mr. Tony Lobo's efforts and forcing me into Toastmasters, I was able to gain a lot of confidence as a communicator. I very confidently say that 30% of my salary today, my CTC or take home, is due to the polishing given to me by Toastmasters International. It is something that I would highly recommend to any person, no matter at what stage of the career they are, no matter how expert the speakers they are, they can hone their skills further. And if you are absolute novice, don't worry. It is a very positive, very encouraging space where you can learn to communicate. And I realized that my forte was not the inspiring, highfalutin speeches that many people used to talk about with quotations from Socrates and Buddha and stuff like that. I would rather, at the end of a hard working day, make the people in the room laugh out loud. And that's how I started my journey towards becoming more humorous as a comedian.
Actually, very well said, because this I'm able to relate with it absolutely well, because as I was growing up, back then in school days I was a slightly different person, and I started evolving after I left school. And I used to close my eyes and think, if I want to be the best person in whatever I do, I didn't know, maybe I meant to be, if I were to be an influencer, then probably communication, that is being a good orator, is very, very, very necessary. And I used to validate my thought, and I'm able to absolutely relate with what your grandfather instilled in you. And I used to close my eyes and wonder that today, if I think of a spiritual leader, which name comes to my mind? Somebody who's a brilliant orator. If I think of a film star, which is the name that comes to my mind? Someone who's a brilliant orator. If I think of a sports person, which is that name that comes to my mind? Someone who's a brilliant orator. So the film star may not be the best actor, but if he's been able to influence me, if I have a recall to that name, then I think he needs to be a good orator. And that's something which I also started putting into practice and started working on these skills. That if I want to be the best HR professional, I had set a very small target for myself. And if I wanted to be there, then I need to be an influencer to be able to influence everybody 360 degrees. I think that's very well said. And that's a message I really, why I'm spending a couple of minutes on this point, Sujan, is that I want everybody here, the audience here, to take away this message that no matter how greatly skilled you are in the technicalities of your profession, I think if you really have to influence people, communication becomes a great aspect. One is you have to learn to listen, be an excellent listener, and also be able to influence, because if you have to get across your ideas to people, to your stakeholders, I think that's where communication plays a key role if you have to move ahead. Otherwise, for HR people, it's always very easy to get into a comfort zone and say that we are a support function. But if you really have to become enablers, I think it goes without saying that communication is of utmost importance. And I'm so glad that you brought in the Toastmasters aspect, because I've also been recommending that people do that and just hone their skills, because it's not only about being able to speak well, it's all about communication. And thank you so much for that. So we have one question from Haley. I think when you spoke about different cultures in different countries, I think this is related to that. But Haley, you can unmute yourself and correct me if I'm wrong. Her question is, are there any elements which you think are universal, something which is safe across cultures, across the globe? Is there something, what is it that one can do to be really safe and not offend any culture? Is there any element which is universal?
I would say that food is something which is very easy to connect with. Most people, human beings, usually connect over food. So making fun, bringing in humor in terms of food, about the quantity of food to be eaten, and self-deprecating humor. When I talk about food, for example, I talk about the things with respect to my food intake, my fight with being overweight, who isn't, for that matter. But these are the things which are very easy to strike up humor on. I see, for example, Murad Khal, my colleague from Algeria. I see him here, and there was only one occasion when I went to the beautiful country of Algeria, and Murad took me to an Indian restaurant, and it happened to be the only Indian restaurant in Algiers. And why would anyone want to eat Indian food after going to Algeria? I don't know, but Murad, in his wisdom, thought that that would be a good idea. So Murad took me to Algeria, and Algerians love Indians. They watch a lot of Bollywood, and so it was great. I was obviously the only Indian, very visibly Indian, walking into the restaurant, and this restaurant had a huge cinema screen, sort of, and they were projecting Bollywood songs. It was all fine until Dreamam Wekapam started on the screen. And there were families there, kids there, and Dreamam Wekapam, those of you who remember that song, it's a horrible song. I mean, I wouldn't want that on my worst enemy. And the whole restaurant turns and looks at me as if I was responsible for it. So, yes, that was one occasion where I was very, very embarrassed. And I saw Murad here, so I remembered the incident which happened to me in Algeria. And I simply wanted to run away at that point of time until that song was over.
So here is an observation from Bruhad, and he says that choosing to be a humor-enabling orator to influence people rather than a motivational speaker, and motivational speaker is within quotes, is a great point. Is a great point to take away, and I agree with Bruhad because many a times I've noticed that when you become one of those typical motivational speakers for the sake of being a motivational speaker, the words that you speak come from the head. दिमाग से निकलते हैं शब्द अल्फाज, right? And a lot of times that's not I mean, words from the head are merely heard, but when you're a natural orator, or when you develop those skills to become a natural orator purely to influence people and not really for the sake of becoming a motivational speaker, the words come from the heart, and when words come from the heart, they're also felt and not merely heard. So uh, what are your thoughts around it? Words coming from the head and words coming from the heart, and how would you relate it in corporate communication?
I was now that you say that, I am reminded of another fantastic orator, a very controversial orator, albeit he is no more, Osho or Rajneesh. Yeah. So Rajneesh was a fantastic orator. I mean, leave aside his thoughts and beliefs, we may agree with them or we may not, but he was a orator who used to use humor tremendously in his speeches, and he used to be very inspirational as a speaker. But I'm not going to talk about humor. What I'm going to talk about is something else that he said. He said that there are two ways to lead people. One way, there are two very easy ways to lead people. One, the easiest way to lead people, and which political leaders, religious leaders, parents, often I'm guilty myself, do to lead, is through fear. You tell people that they are going to face hell after death if they don't do XYZ. You tell people that a certain community is going to take away this, or those people who are different are going to take away your jobs, or they are going to do this, or you are going to be financially ruined, or computers are going to take away your jobs, rise and burn down all the ATMs and computers, whatever. It is very easy to lead through fear. You want to become a leader, learn what fear to invoke. It is very easy. But it is harder to be a leader by helping people discover their greater self. The fact that you have it within you. A seed does not need to be told how to grow up into an oak tree. Everybody is that seed within. How to inspire people to discover the greatness within, how to go beyond what they think they are capable. If they feel that they can cover a mile in X amount of seconds, how to do it at a shorter time. If they think they can jump only so much, how to make them jump higher. If you think that they can sell only 300 units per month, how to help them sell 3,000. And that is something which is very difficult to do. And that is why so few leaders, so few religious personalities, so few teachers, so few parents adapt that way. What do we say when we go to our children? Tomorrow you won't have a job. Naukri nahi milegi. When I was kid, the favorite profession which we were threatened with was khalasi. For those of you who don't know what's a khalasi, Khalasi is the guy who sits beside the driver. He is the guy who, fetches him the bidi, washes his dishes. He's generally that chotu fellow who sits beside the driver. You will become a Khalasi. तुम्हारी पढ़ाई नहीं होगी, तुम खलासी बनोगे. So that is what we keep telling our kids. So we keep scaring our kids that instead of giving them the confidence, instead of inspiring them to go ahead and do big things. I'm guilty of that too. But it is necessary for us whenever we face our teams to stop yourself in the track. It is like a person who's got a habit of swearing, of saying bad words. He has to stop himself. Of a person who wants to stop smoking, every time he feels the urge, he should stop himself for reaching for the cigarette or whatever bad habit you have. Similarly, it is a bad habit we have whereby when we face our teams, when we face our children, when we face anybody, and we want to lead them towards a behavior through negativity by scaring them, we need to stop ourselves and rather inspire them, tell them that they are capable of bigger things, and talk of the positive. And that is something which I feel is very important from the way of inspiration.
Yeah, and as you speak, I'm also getting a cue here that parenting is so very similar to managing teams at the workplace, and I keep drawing these analogies myself. I look back at the kind of parenting style I have. I've been, you know that very well. I've been brought up in a very democratic manner, in a very gender neutral manner. That's how I've been brought up. You've seen me since I was a child, and you've seen how I've been brought up. So the same kind of parenting style, so the same kind of communication style is what I try to practice with my children. And I also noticed that very similar parenting styles, especially in the context of communication. I love this, the whole idea behind adult to adult behavior at the workplace, which helps in bringing out the best in people. So when you're communicating with your team members, if instead of operating at a parent ego state and thereby pushing the individuals to a child ego state, if you're able to have conversations in an adult to adult manner, uh, doesn't that help in bringing out the best out of the individuals? Doesn't that set in a psychological safety? So what are your thoughts around building psychological safety in teams, and does humor help in building psychological safety? Because I have an experience to share after you tell me your story. What's your take on psychological safety and humor?
There is a phrase which says that leadership rests very lightly on his shoulders. Unfortunately, with many people, being the captain, being the leader, being at the helm of a ship does not rest lightly on the shoulders. And when you make a burden of it, it bears you down. It bears you down. The more you think about it, the more it bears you down. The moment you let leadership or the burdens of leading a company, a family, sit lightly on your shoulders, immediately the way you react with your team members changes. I'm reminded of something that we learned at school. Porus, the Persian king, was captured by the Greeks and he was dragged in front of Alexander. And Alexander, being the wise emperor that he was, asked Porus, "So how do you want to be treated?" And Porus replied, similarly, how a king would treat another king. I guess every team member desires and deserves to be treated the same way you would want to be treated by your superiors, by your boss. Whenever a team member, regardless of whether he's in the team today or he was in the team in the past, once a team member, always a team member. That's my credo. Second thing, make it easy for the team member to come up and ask for help. It doesn't matter how many years ago that person was my team member. If I receive a message which says, "Sir, I needed to ask you something," or "I needed help," the answer is always "Bolo dear." You are always available to this person. And leadership, the first rule of leadership is the leadership is about the led, not the leader. It is about the people who are in your team. As long as you don't believe in it sincerely, as long as you are not drenched in it, that it is not about me, it is the people that I lead, that is who comes first, you will not be able to let the mantle of leadership lie on your shoulders lightly.
Absolutely. Very, very, very well put. Because this is something, again, which made a lot of sense to me as I was growing up in the corporate ladder, is that if I have to really, build that psychological safety in my team, no matter how much of guidance I give, how much of support and handholding I do, I think what's most important is let the team know very well that we are all in it together, and success is yours, failure is mine. The moment I keep reinforcing this, not only by words, but actions have to match the words. So the leader is able to demonstrate that, and I'm sure Bruhad, who was in my team till very recently, will definitely vouch for it. I used to keep saying this: success is yours, failure is mine, and not just say, but keep doing it and repeatedly. I think that is what that really sets in that psychological safety. And one of the things that I used to do as an experiment, also within my one of my latest team, which is my masterpiece team, as I call it, is have some deliberate light moments where once in a while the leader should forget the power distance and be ready to fail. Maybe play a mind game or something where the leader also might fail. So do you think having some light moments in the middle of a work week also sometimes helps build psychological safety? Or is it that you can get taken for granted if you start building too much of psychological safety?
Uh, I think that, if you are conscious of getting taken for granted, you are not letting leadership rest lightly on your shoulders. There is some bit of insecurity within you. If you know that the people can be absolutely themselves with you, there is no such worry. Also, there was this very interesting thought about how leadership, you know I'm sorry, I've lost that thought right now. It'll come back to me. It is just that, don't so worry about losing. It is necessary for the team to together try out big targets where you lose together, you win together. If
Yes.
you are not losing, your target setting is you're setting up lollipop targets, as I call them. So it is necessary that you fail at least 30% or 40% of the endeavors, and it is not the leader losing, or it is not one particular team member losing. It is all of you losing together or winning together. And unless you can't handle losses, you have no right to victory. You have no right to victory.
Absolutely. Actually, being accountable for losses is most important. Absolutely, very well said, and that kind of validates the belief that I have been strongly harboring. So Ramanuj Chobe has a point to make, and I'm not very sure if I've understood correctly, but let me give it a shot. Otherwise, we'll ask him. Unfortunately, most of the psychological safety we strive for the forced ranking as reward system pushes us to differentiate, and that's where the care element suffers. So he's asking this question to both of us, Sujin. So, but this is a very typical HR question, but I think everybody is anyone who deals with teams is an HR manager. So I wouldn't mind if you want to take it. So I think what he means to say is, if psychological safety is something which is missing, and that's where the empathy element suffers. You have forced ranking systems or forced processes. So I'm okay if you take a shot at this first, and then
I'll do that. So firstly, I wish to ask that, the best teams often that we see are in the armed forces, for example. Yeah. What are the rewards that they enjoy? Are armed forces people promoted so rapidly, or are their salaries goes up so drastically? Do they receive quarterly rewards? Do they have junkets in Pattaya or Singapore or Macau or wherever? Yet we find that the armed force teams work perfectly well together. They work so well. The teams are motivated. They become friends for life. And I believe that if the very paradigm which says that teams have to be motivated by rewards is flawed. It might be controversial, and I'm going up in front of a room full of HR professionals and challenging the concept of rewards as a way of creating a team. So I'm trying to shake the very tenets of your profession. I'm sorry for that. That is not what is intended. What I'm saying is, very often the fact that you are treated well, you are given challenging tasks, you are given a lot of freedom to go ahead and implement your own things, and you feel wanted as a member of the team is a huge motivation beyond the rewards. Being treated as a contributing, respected part of a team which performs, which fights together, loses together, is often a bigger reward than a trip to wherever, or a promotion, or a 300 rupee raise per month, or whatever. Being treated well is something which is very, very important. And
Absolutely.
I see too many organizations talk about customer satisfaction, customer experience, while they treat their teams terribly. If Gangotri itself is polluted, how can Ganga be a holy river. Yeah. So first, the teams should be treated well. If you wish to see that your customers are treated well, you can't treat your own employees badly. Uh, you know, Shabby treatment meted out to people, uh, all sorts of injustices, all sorts of imbalances, and leaders, too many leaders who don't walk the talk. And then you say that why is the customer satisfaction going down? Why is the customer experience not good? Good customer experiences come from good teams. If the people are not overworked, if they come to office thinking, wow, I'm coming to work, not dragging their corpses to office every day because they are overworked, they are insulted, they are tired. It is being commended. It is being recognized on a daily basis rather than that one day when you pin a medal to their hearts.
Absolutely. Thank God it's Monday is something that has to start happening instead of TGIF, TGIM. And and all of us were able to do that. I think we deserve a pat on the back. We are almost on the hour, but then one last question, and if there are any questions, we'll take them. But one last question from my side is, in your bio, I did read that you are doing a lot of work towards education. You are on the advisory board of many institutions. You've also you have this amazing creative streak in you, which I have seen in your school days, and I also see that you have an article of yours published in the Reader's Digest, and I keep reading the pieces that you share with me. How are you balancing, your work life and also developing the creative streak and doing so much towards the student community? How do you bring that into you? I'm doing that myself and I'm striving to do a good job, but I would like to learn some tips from you.
Firstly, the biggest impediment to doing more is this mental block that we have that I'm busy. I'm not busy. I'm not doing sufficient work. I'm absolutely at ease. I am triple hatting right now, 3 responsibilities at work. So there are 3 different teams that I work with. But that does not mean that I don't find time to read books, to listen to music, to take a walk in the garden, to join on webinars like this at least twice a month. It is the moment you tell yourself that you are busy, you are blocking off possibilities. There's a very interesting movie. I think it is on one of the online, either Amazon Prime or Netflix. Have a look at it. It's about a person who is motivated by a guru, a spiritual guru or a motivational speaker to say yes to everything in life. Ultimately, it leads to complications in his life. I'm not saying that you should say yes to every engagement that is offered to you, but definitely give it a thought. If you feel that it will bring joy to you, as this interaction today is bringing to me, why not say yes? It is very easy to say on a Sunday evening, why should I get into a webinar, bore myself and bore another 200 people? But why not look at it as a positive experience where it helps me connect to people I have never connected in the world, to discover friends who I would go on to find. Many of you might become friends. Maybe I would learn something new. To be open to the possibilities. It is very easy to say Sunday evening, I'm going to sit and watch a movie. But if you say yes to possibilities, then everything is possible.
Wonderful. Now this explains, how you immediately said yes to this. I was actually hesitating. Would it make sense for you to invite to, have you here with a bunch of HR folks? But I thought that we have a lot to learn from you, especially on this aspect of bringing humor at the workplace. And I was immensely pleased, and now I get it. Now I know why you said yes, because you were ready to experiment in this interaction. And of course, I very well understand how you manage your time, because your response to me last night was actually not last night. It was at 1:30 a.m. So yeah, so you actually responded to me this morning at 1:30. So that explains how happy you are coming over here and how excited you are. And I must say, I'm immensely pleased to have had you here. That's on behalf of everybody here at HR Milestones. Paresh Trivedi is just confirming, is the movie's name Yes Man? So for the benefit of all, was that the name of the movie?
Possibly.
Yeah. So I think we should explore that. That's wonderful. So I did tell you that you're in for a surprise. Yeah, so if you see one of the persons that is logged in here, the name SH Subramanian, the message from your my internet connection became unstable. Yeah, so there's a message which I want to read out before we have closing notes from Hareshji. The message is Sujan's silent smile, quest for knowledge, creativity in thinking and expressing, and above all, unassuming delineation have made him successful. He is blessed with a great sense of humor to get some happiness from life and pass it on to other folks. This message is from Mrs. Kokilamani for you. So with that, so she's been watching us.
Harini's mother and my favorite teacher.
So she's been listening to us. She's been listening to this conversation all through, Sujan. So my parents were the special guests, and that's a little surprise I wanted to give you this evening. So with that, that's all from me. And if we have any questions, we can take them. Otherwise, over to you, Hareshji, or anybody from the HR Master.
So today was the day of hijacking.
Maybe the bolti band ho gayi na, so everyone is happy now.
Total pyramid was inverse, and the person who is prepared for introducing HR myself, she's waiting. कब मेरा number
We
कब
should hear
आएगा?
that. Yes, we should hear that. Yes.
आएगा कि नहीं आएगा? सबसे पहले आएगा कि नहीं आएगा? आएगा तो कब आएगा? So let us complete that formality also. Ruchi, would you please take it forward?
Yes, yes, it was really lovely. You both have hijacked it, and I really didn't felt it, that it has been hijacked. And throughout the session, this was a big smile. And Harini, anyways, you keep humor all the time. So, and learn a lot from Mr. Sujan Roy as well. So, completing the ritual, I'll give a brief introduction about HR milestone to Mr. Sujan Roy. Anyways, we really do not require a brief introduction, but just a little bit about what we are. So it's an amazing platform that has been started to give back to the society with a vision. And there were three major objectives: network for the network, enhance competency of HR professional, bridging gap between industry and academy through initiative like HR Kitly, Let's Say, They'll Say, and wonderful Wonderland of Corporate Jungle. We have a presence in Pan India, and we are becoming big with a 3,000 registered member. We are also available on social media, YouTube channel. We have our own YouTube channel, Facebook, and yes, we also have Zoom. And this was our 49th session, and just to thank Mr. Sujan, it was really lovely hearing how we can actually bring humor to our work, about leaders as a great orator, inspiring people rather than scaring people to bring out the best. Leadership is about lead. And this one thing that has struck to me is, being into HR, people think of giving to people in terms of monetary or kind of but I have personally witnessed it that, by letting people feel that this is an important place is really very important, and they really work by themselves rather than we pushing them to give results. But if we really make them feel that, you're important, it becomes very easy for employee to deliver and stay happy in the organization. So that's it from my side. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And before we sign off, I think Himanshu has a question. Sujan, can you recommend some good books on leadership? I can recommend a couple, but do you have any books in mind? Which
one of my favorites, which is also available on Audible, and I'm not plugging, I'm not getting any money from Audible, but let me tell you that if you hate reading, if you don't find time to read, if you commute long distances, try Audible. And the first book I would recommend on leadership, and one which I go back to time and again, is Leaders Eat Last. It comes from the fact that in a military platoon, the platoon commander always ensures that all his troops are fed first before he opens the meal himself. So leaders eat last, and that's a credo which is very important to for us to remember. And I would definitely recommend that book.
And there are two books which I recommend, and Sujan actually touched upon some of the concepts that are there. One book is called Punished by Rewards, which is by an author by name Alfie Kohn. That's a great book, and that really brings out the flaws in giving stars and A grades, and it can be really applied in the corporate world as well. And another book is The Last Lecture. These are two books which really don't come in the leadership category, but they're definitely great books from which you draw a lot of inspiration to become good leaders. So that's my vote. And also Power of Habit is another brilliant book, which is
Peter Drucker.
Yes.
And one of the best book is Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, yes.
You'll find everything
Can't
in that.
deny that. Yeah.
Yeah, so the best book for leadership and all strategies or whatever principles we talk about is available if you read it in a proper way without closing your eyes.
Incidentally, very interestingly, Spotify, I noticed, has a podcast by Jaya Rao on Gita, which is simplified and made more relevant to us. I haven't listened to it, but I understand from friends that it's interesting. And Spotify is free; you don't have to pay necessarily. You can check out that podcast; it might be interesting. I intend to check it out definitely on the Gita by Jaya Rao.
So with that, I endorse what Harini has said, that calling you, just I put up a message to you that I want to talk to you. Immediately we connected each other and you agreed. Subsequently, we were to do on Wednesday, and then plan change, and it was Sunday. You have never. I just could not find a fraction of second that you want a time to think it over. You said yes, it's best time Sunday. So Sujani, thank you very much for coming here and sharing such a wonderful insight. Humor is, yes, honestly, I don't know why HR has forgotten that. मैं जब भी HR वाले को देखता हूँ, पता नहीं किस tension में जीते हैं. I still don't know, either I am not doing the proper justice to HR profession, or people are somewhere I am missing. We don't know where the humor has gone.
Yes.
So with that, thank you everyone. If we can have a photograph, Haley.
Yeah, turn on videos, everyone, if possible. And Haley is our official photographer.
Video open. Yeah. So, आशीष, क्या बात है? आशीष जी भी आ जाएं. हेली हो गया?
सर वीडियो ओपन नहीं कर रहे हैं सभी लोग.
चिल्ला ना, जोर से चिल्ला, खोल देंगे सब. उसका वैसे ही खुल जाएगा सबका.
जैनिक भाई ओपन करो.
गोली लग जाएगी.
It's okay. It's Sunday evening, so it's okay. Don't force people. It's all right. Whoever wishes to.
Yes.
Done.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Haley. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Haley.
Thank you very much for this
Thank you
opportunity.
very much. Thank you very much.
Bye bye. Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.